Well, I hope you're having a beautiful day listening to the great music we're playing for you here on your number one station, RX Radio. And I hope that life is treating you well and that your hustle is going great. Whether you are a business person, whether you are a hustler doing your thing here and there, or whether you are an employed person who reports somewhere every day to do your job, hey, it all boils down to one thing. It's about making that money, and I hope you're making it to the best of your ability. But the question is, under what circumstances are you engaged, especially if you are in formal employment? It's been found that 7 out of every 10 employed Ugandans are working without a written contract, which makes them vulnerable to labor rights abuses and job insecurity. This, according to the Gender and Labor Minister, Betty Amongi, who said that an increasing number of workers, mainly in the private sector, employers prefer to subcontract, to outsource, or to hire individuals without formal documentation to reduce on operational costs. And according to the Minister of Gender and Labor, Betty Amongi, she says that this illegal arrangement, she refers to it as illegal, she says that it helps company to get labor without reflecting the individuals as employees on payroll, which is able to mask them or to shield them from any responsibility to remit pension contributions, pay as you earn, or provide treatment or compensation to a worker that is injured in the line of duty, and on she goes. Of course, the 1st of May, yesterday, was Labor Day, and so it is in that capacity that these remarks were made, which of course is leading to some interesting conversations in the realm of labor, of workers' rights, and legalities. And to that, I would say, Olive, that I wonder if the government is taking into account the challenges of the private sector. I feel like the way the world works is that everyone looks to find arrangements that work. Essentially, ideally, you settle into a mutually beneficial arrangement in which a worker and an employee or employer can come to an arrangement where, okay, I can work under these terms, and this will be the arrangement. So are we going to work together or not? And based on whether or not they agree, they proceed. I think when it comes to things like, turning people into contractors rather than employees, I can understand why an employer would do that, because it minimizes on the tax obligations, because you would have to pay as you earn on people that are registered as employees. And so in order to limit that liability, some workers are treated as contractors, such that you're not really paying pay as you earn on their salaries, so you're not remitting.
But even with contractors, isn't there supposed to be like a written document agreeing that this is how we are going to work, this is how we operate?
Of course. Now the thing is, in an ideal situation you can have that, but like I said, we live in a hustler's economy, right? Or if all factors remain constant and we're living in a fair world, I think even those that would offer those opportunities would have the security to, I guess, indulge in that kind of thing. But where the employers themselves aren't very certain about their own economic conditions, it's easy to see how there might be some hesitation about going into sort of these more extensive contracts, which could commit the employer to terms that they may not be able to meet, or might also commit the worker to terms that they themselves are not able to meet. Because in a way, it goes both ways. There might be things that an employer might want from a worker, and then there might be things that a worker might want from an employer. Sometimes you kind of have to reach an agreement on that. Otherwise, you reach a point where, on one hand, it may feel exploitative to a worker, but on the other hand, it might also be unfair to the employer.
Of course, this conversation can't be 100% balanced, because every person is in it for themselves. The employer will explain, and the perspective you're explaining actually makes sense, especially for SMEs, that is small enterprise, small SMEs, small businesses. So someone will be like you said, you're not very sure about where your money is coming from, or when the next check is going to be paid, and then you have running costs. So what do? You try to evade certain things here and there so that the business can stay afloat and the employers are paid and you also make some money. But obviously from an employee's perspective, it's not missed that you're not protected, because if there is no contract, anything can happen. And if an agreement is by word of mouth, in case of a legal issue, you cannot use word of mouth as evidence. You cannot go to court and say, this is what we agreed upon. It wasn't written anywhere. So the employer can actually get themselves out of a twist because there is no written agreement. And in this country, it has happened so in many industries and in many businesses. I've heard stories of, there was a story that went viral a couple of months ago of, I think it was a TV station in Western Uganda that closed, and it hadn't paid its employees for like 12 months. And people in the comment section were like, but this is what happens in Uganda. And many gave examples of where they worked from and how maybe businesses failed and they ended up not being paid, right? And of course, the minister also mentioned something that actually away from this corporate work that goes into like, let's say factories, they have so many low-level employees who have no contracts, and in case at work there is an accident, they're not protected. I've had stories of employees operating machinery and maybe they lose fingers or they lose half of their arm, and the company is not liable because there was no contract to agree that in case this happens to you, this is how we are going to take care of you. And this happens to many of those, especially in factories.
So I don't know if then, as you mentioned earlier, that there could be a conversation about the different tiers of employers and how maybe different levels of obligation and responsibility can be allotted to them. Because I would have to tell you that if you're running an SME, like first of all, the challenges of starting up an SME, and if this is being done with, say, private resources, and you're operating in an economy that is fairly uncertain, it can be quite, you might want to do great things and create opportunities, but at the same time, you kind of have to balance that against, okay, what kind of risk exposure are you putting yourself in on one hand? And then I guess the people you engage have to sort of ask themselves, okay, so what's the trade-off here? Do I feel that being involved in this will give me something of value to offset any of the risks that might arise from operating under conditions that may not strictly be, I guess, formal or strictly be in line with, whatever particular interests a person might have. Because unless there's sort of a meeting or an intersection of interests, what's going to happen is people are not going to want to start businesses, and opportunities are not going to be created. And then you'll live in a country where everything is done by the books. All the laws are in place, and then there are no jobs. And no one being willing to create the jobs.
I hear you when you say that, but let's face it. Whatever you agree on by word of mouth, what would stop you from putting it on paper? Is it to evade taxes?
But it works.
Like the minister said.
It works both ways. I'll give you an example. How many times do people quit jobs? Like they just wake up one day and they disappear.
And they don't show up.
And they don't show up.
I think it depends in the line on the business they're in. If you have structure and you know that this is how the organization I work for operates. Now I'm speaking in the corporate sense, because people who work for, let's say, a boutique are not going to do the same thing of give you maybe a 1 month notice that they will be leaving. But also in the event that yes, I work for you, but I have no contract, what stops me from telling the next employer that I'm ready the minute you're ready? Because there is nothing compelling me to stay and give my current employer a heads up.
You're right, and that's why it's, like I said, it works both ways. If there is no contract between you and the employee can also leave anytime they want. And with regards to termination, it might be slightly different.
That's different.
But the question,
with or without a contract.
See, the question I would have the right to terminate. Question I would ask is this, especially for say younger employees or really employees in general. For example, how do they handle domestic workers, right? Because in principle, this should also apply to domestic workers.
That's true.
And how many people can claim their domestic workers are under contract? The house helps, the shamba boys, or whatever else. So should they also be arguing, the house girls, that I am being exploited because I have no written contract with my employer? So if Madame tomorrow gets angry at me because I burnt the beans, and she sends me back to the village, do I have recourse?
It's like you saying that as a CEO or a manager of a certain office, it's like you're comparing their work and their additions to your company to the work of maids. I'm not saying maids are not doing great work, but really, is that the best comparison you could get?
This is why I use the word principle, which is my favorite word, because principle is intended to just focus on the actual specifics at hand rather than how it is perceived or how someone feels about it.
So maybe we start from where contracts are normal.
A job is a job. A hairdresser, a masseuse, a barista, like a Rolex maker. This is all work. And they're all very respectable professions. They pay differently, of course, require different levels of experience. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that someone might feel demeaned when one job is compared to another. I feel like all jobs are valuable, including, some people say even being a housewife is a job, but that's a story for another day. But I guess the point I'm making is this. It's easy if you're looking at sort of multi-million corporation type situation where there might be a lot of investment capital involved, or if you're looking at like a government institution, a parastatal. I would just say that with smaller businesses, the challenges are a bit stiffer. And I have a lot of friends in private sector who either through savings accumulated through years in employment, they try to start something, starting a little bakery here, a little restaurant there, a little consultancy here and there, and they're going in and facing tremendous risks in a very volatile market, myself included. So I do have some sympathy for entrepreneurs who will find creative ways of, I shouldn't say evading, but navigating through these murky waters, at least until a point where they feel like, okay, the business has had a chance to grow to where things feel more comfortable, more stable. So let's maybe, I guess you could say you're now large enough and stable enough to enact some of those more formal policies. Now, I know that shall have its risks, because if not that, I worry that people are just not going to bother, that the risks would be insane.
I think in all fairness, employers would like to do the right thing because, for instance, you've been employed before and you know the advantages of having a contract, of knowing your KPIs, you know your JD, so, and what you're entitled to as far as your job is concerned. But we work in a country where the taxes to begin with are not favoring business owners. Recently, what was that? NSSF, where all companies are supposed to remit contributions for their employees.
For all employees.
Exactly. And when I had a conversation with someone from the business space, he was like, we would like to do this, but at the same time, how look at the running costs, look at the taxes, look at the volatile situation we work in. So at the end of the day, you are in business, not charity. You need to make some profits for yourself and you need the company to grow. And because of that, there are things you're not going to do even if they benefit your employees, because the government itself is not actually being lenient on you. And if the government wants employers to be lenient, they have to make it easy for people to run businesses, especially small businesses.
I would agree. I think, on one hand, people should appreciate that. I think most people that operate businesses, they want workers to be happy. They would want to extend various types of benefits and amenities to workers. But, at some point, it has to be measured against the reality of the economy that they're working in. And if things are made that much harder for the employer, And I know that this is a complicated debate.
It is, because
and I don't
on
think
one
it's...
hand, in as much as I empathize with business owners as an employee, I also feel like, okay, so where is the middle ground here?
Because where's the protection for the employer?
Yeah.
You know, like an employer could invest his life savings into a business enterprise, right? And for a period of time offered people livelihood. If the business collapses and it goes belly up, the employees move on and do other things with their lives.
I understand that. But
Now the employer who has lost everything, where does he go?
I know, I understand that. That's why I say this conversation can never be balanced, because as you ask that question, I am also asking, where is the protection for the employee, especially let's factor in people that, like I said, work in factories. Who protects them when they lose, let's say, their hands? Or who protects their families when they die on the job? Because most companies just move on like nothing happened.
So I think ideally, and this sounds a bit naive, but idealistically you want there to be an element of trust, such that if you are a worker in a factory and you are injured, that your employer will just see it fit to provide assistance.
Unfortunately,
for your
that's
treatment.
not really what happens.
Ideally, right? Because at the same time, okay, imagine you're in a scenario where, let's say it's a small carpentry workshop you have, let's say. It's just you and maybe two other guys. You bought one electric saw and a few other tools that you use in a furniture shop You're making chairs and sofas and things like this. And so it's maybe you and two other guys. So you've just secured yourself some space there in Zambia by the roadside. You're trying your best, okay? And you can't really say you're making good money yet. And let's say one of the guys, he's hammering the chair and he bangs his toe or his thumb and it pops off, right? Would this carpentry owner be in position to compensate this person to the tunes of however many millions that the law might provide for in this
Ideally,
instance?
he should.
You get?
Okay, it may not be give this person millions, but at least they should ensure that the medical bills are attended to. Because if I hurt myself on duty doing the work you hired me to do, it doesn't matter where you're going to have to find the money, but you should find the money and treat this person, because it wasn't because they were being reckless. It's because accidents happen in certain trades.
But that's what I'm saying, and this is where the balance has to be found, because an entrepreneur goes into entrepreneurship thinking that they have a dream that they wish to try to realize, okay? And let's say it might require the help of employees to get it off the ground, okay? But like once you cast all these dangerous scenario, like once you cast all these dangerous hurdles and potential penalties over their heads, I think it's going to discourage a lot of people. And this is why I'm saying, like, people need to ask themselves the question, because I heard you say it doesn't matter, it's up to you to find the money where you're going to find it.
If someone was injured, or Fatboy, if you worked in a factory and you were injured during the course of your work, wouldn't you expect your employer to actually at least pay your hospital bills? My
point is, like I said, it's not a black or white conversation.
This should be. There are instances where it should be black or white.
The reason, you see, because think of it this way. Imagine if you are, like I said, you're this guy, you opened a stall in Zambia to make sofas, all right? And then a young guy comes to you and says, hey, I can do some work around here. And you're like, okay. You start to work together, and along the way he injures his foot, his toe, his finger, or whatever. Now let's say your relationship is good enough that you can provide some kind of assistance or to some extent. But if the injury is so grave that it require a significant amount of money, more than, let's say, the business could afford, what is supposed to happen in that instance? Is the business supposed to close?
And what is supposed to happen to the employee that was injured? Are they supposed to die?
That's why I said it's not black or white. Because if you create a scenario in which you're going to be quick to punish the employer in this instance,
it's not punishment. You see, when you're starting a business, you're supposed to actually cover, not necessarily cover, but you're supposed to make research and know that all bases have been looked into. You look at what might happen and what is happening right now. If you are running a factory or a carpentry shop, you know that certain types of accidents are bound to happen, and you should know that in the event that happens, there is a plan. And I know someone will say, "Oh, Olive sounds so naive," but honestly, employers want to get themselves out of certain things. And like I said, I would understand if he cannot compensate and say that the court said give him this amount. But I'm like, okay, in the event that you can't do that, can you at least do the bare minimum ensuring that this person is actually treated?
I would have to ask if workers advocates are willing to be consistent in their advocacy, because I gave the example of people who have domestic workers who are really workers. So if you have a maid at home, you are an employer. If your maid was carrying a basin of water from, say, the bathroom to the sitting room to mop, and let's say she slips and falls and breaks her back and she's paralyzed, and then this maid came to you and said, I need to seek treatment in America. It's going to cost $50,000. Why
are you making it so extreme? Because obviously how many Ugandans go to the US to... My
point is, because you are the one who said...
No.
Wait a minute. It is you who said it is up to you to find the money. No, I don't care where you get it. You see,
when you have, let's say, cancer, you can either go to Uganda Cancer Institute for treatment, or go to Aga Khan in Nairobi, or go to India, or go to Germany, wherever you can afford. If my maid got sick,
who decides what you can afford? Who decides what you can afford?
You start from the bases. Can we start by going to Uganda Cancer Institute? How much is the bill? If I can afford the bill at Uganda Cancer Institute, why shouldn't I pay that bill? If her family decides that we must go to America, then that's when we are going to have a conversation, and probably that's when we can agree, because it's like someone who is giving birth and they say, I want to give birth from Nakasero Hospital, and someone else is going to Nsambia Hospital. Both of these are hospitals. The employer may be like, I can afford Nsambia, I'll pay all the bills in Nsambia, but if you want to go to Nakasero, I'll see what I can afford that I was going to pay in Zambia and give it to you. But some employers don't want to do anything. They don't want to treat at all.
But I still would like to follow your line of thinking on this. So let's say the employee, the maid in question here, refuses the treatment you're offering in the facility that you are proposing, okay? And instead comes to you with a counter proposal of where they would wish to be treated, and it so happens that the cost of that treatment is beyond what you can afford. You would have to sell your house if you had one.
No, we would
to pay for it. What would you do?
No, we would have to have a conversation, because, like I said, legally you can't say I refused to take care of you. Okay, it's like a parent. The government expects you to pay, rather to take your child. No, listen, hear me out.
Okay.
The government, as a parent, expects you to educate your child, but it does not say that you must take your child to, let's say, Econs International. You can actually take the child to a UPE school, and no one will ever punish you for not taking your child to Econs if you can afford it.
So what?
And all I'm saying is,
so who sets the limit for what amount should be paid for a particular type of injury? Let me ask. Because unless you want to take back the part where you said it's up to you to find the money.
No,
I don't care how much it costs.
You have to find the money.
That's what you said.
No, it's like I've been speaking and you're not listening. All I'm saying is this. You have gotten an accident. Do you need surgery? Yes. Can Mlago do it on Zambia or Mengo or Rubaga? Yes.
Not well.
No.
Not to my liking.
No. What do you mean not to your liking? Can they or can they not do it?
Because...
have they confirmed that they can do it or they can't?
My point is, you haven't answered this question of who it is that decides. Because, like I said, if you are a carpenter and you chopped off or your hand And then it's good. Let's say someone says, I want the use of my hand, I want a prosthetic hand, let's say, the one with the machines, you use brain waves and then you move you move your digits, right?
That's where,
now wait a minute,
you go and have a conversation.
Wait a minute. So at what point do you get to say, I'm sorry, but I can't pay for you to get a prosthetic arm?
First of all treat the injury, handle the injury, and if they insist they want a prosthetic arm, that's when you can have a conversation and say, according to research, this is how much it costs, and the business and myself cannot afford this. But when I said do whatever you can to find the money, I meant if there has been an accident, handle the accident, handle the injury, make sure that the person is treated. If they want anything extra and fancy and you cannot afford it, that's when you have a conversation. Because my argument was, there are many cases where people are injured, especially in factories. They are not treated. They are left to rot. If you go to Mulago, you're going to hear these stories. They are taken to the hospital and the employer doesn't show up again.
That's why I said, and it's a complicated conversation. And, I used to be, back when I was only an employee, I'd have probably sang that song till I got tired. But once you enter the realm of business and you see the kinds of pressures you deal with, because as you're trying to run a business and to keep it running and to ensure you can take care of workers, your workers aren't thinking about you or your problems. Your problems are your own.
Because they also have their problems, and you don't care about their problems too, do you?
If you collapse and die, or become bedridden, they're not supposed to compensate you.
But you see,
right?
Even me, if I collapsed and died, or if I collapsed and I'm bedridden, you would come to the hospital to see me for a few months, but I collapsed today and tomorrow there is someone to replace me. Jamie Foxx, I think you saw it recently. He had a stroke. He was in hospital. They were filming a movie. It had a few, days left. They got a stunt double to complete the work. So what am I saying? Yes, we want the jobs. Yes, you want the employees. You want to run the business. Employees don't care about you. And even the boss cares about you to a certain degree. Isn't that the thing? That's what happens across the board.
Okay, so for me, I would advocate that these types of discussions are more personal, which is not to say it won't have its own fair share of complications. I'm just saying there is a huge risk of this because if you look at how labor laws are being discussed, like let's say in America, in debates about minimum wage, right? Or, we need a livable wage. This is what many of the workers in the more expensive cities have been complaining. And what did the business owners do? They decided to automate everything, right? Or many supermarkets now don't even have people at the till. Like you what do you call it? I forget the term of it.
Checkout.
Self-checkout. So if previously workers were complaining for lack of overtime, this or that and the other, I guess the employers got tired of hearing about that and just decided to automate everything. And now there is AI. Oh my gosh. AI, first of all, is going to render a lot of clerical jobs, a lot of administrative jobs, a lot of jobs in the creative field is at risk because of AI. And so the more demands that are made, I feel like you're just going to push technology more towards creating solutions.
I feel like that is a threat from employers.
Creating
because
solutions.
If all people need is some bit of security, like a contract, and you say, if you keep making demands, we shall just use AI. At the end of the day, it's a 50-50. The employees get something.
What I mean is that like I said, it works both ways. The demands come from both ways. The employers have their demands and the employees have their demands. So the question is, both sides are going to try to use what they can to obtain leverage. Employees are now, and workers, we're seeing them either unionizing or appealing to labor laws to improve their conditions. And business owners are shifting to technology to improve their situation.
Yeah, there are businesses that
so
will
the question
turn
is,
to technology, but not
will the laws cut? Are the laws going to move faster in dealing with the grievances of employees faster than technology will move to address the grievances of employers.
The thing about technology is that, yes, we love it. It has made life easy. But then there are certain industries or jobs where you're not just going to use your technology. Is technology going to be with you in court if you need legal representation? Is it going to play the role of a lawyer?
I'm glad you asked.
Are you going to go with your computer to answer questions and cross witnesses?
I'm glad you asked that, because actually there is, I did see a Twitter space by lawyers and paralegals who were discussing the threat of AI on their profession. So they too can sense that, for example, a lot of the money that lawyers make isn't even in the court stuff, but is in the drafting and documents and analyzing, that kind of stuff, like the more desk stuff, right, outside of the court stuff. Court stuff is just the minutia of what a lawyer does. Now, the other stuff, AI is going to be able to assume a whole bulk of it. So I'd be curious to see sort of, going forward where things go. If at the end of the day, AI doesn't move to the point where workers can be replaced and employers are still heavily dependent on workers, and the workers are able to lobby the government for laws that offers them more protection and more benefits. I guess that'll be that. But at the same time, the government is going to have to deal with issues of factories moving, investors moving. You've seen how a lot of American companies now, their factories aren't even in the States for the same reason.
Actually, the main reason why we don't have a minimum income wage in Uganda is because the government argues that it's gonna chase away investors.
Which I can agree with. Like if you're being serious about this, how are you going to woo investors away from China, where the laws there they tend to be more favorable towards the investors? And the Chinese government seems to have gambled on the fact that in the long run it will benefit them more, which arguably it has economically. There are quibbles about workers' rights and people in factories, all that stuff for sure, but the Chinese economy as a whole has grown exponentially. So the question it would be for any government.
Do you think that is because of numbers, given the population of China vis-a-vis Uganda? Because at the end of the day, I feel like these two economies are quite different. One of them may not have minimum income wage. The other may have or may not. But how do both of these economies actually fare? One is way better and actually is lending to the other.
Who is lending? Because
China is lending to Uganda.
Yes, they are. So, I don't know. Perhaps it's a conversation way beyond our pay grade. Maybe there are people who know more about these things than us.
So, I think when it comes to workers and employers, this conversation is three-level. There is the government, there is the employers, and of course the employees. And unless those three can have something that works for all, then this conversation will just remain a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see. And of course, seeing as these remarks that we've been discussing have come from the government, and we know the government mostly just pays lip service, chances are they don't even really care and they're going to do nothing about it. But that being said, let the conversation proceed, and you can let us know what you think about this. You can head on over to our Facebook, Twitter, or if you're watching this later on our YouTube channel, you can leave your comments below. Tell us what you think about the remarks by the Gender and Labor Minister, Betty Amongi, saying that employers, especially in the private sector, are preferring to subcontract and to outsource in a bid to minimize their pay-as-you-earn tax liabilities and all other things. Do you think employers are being dodgy there, and should they be brought to heel? You can let us know.